his daughter Melinda shared something really beautiful when she said that here, after many years of mud and gunk, Michael became the lotus. I cannot think of a more powerful image for a human life, because the lotus flower doesn't grow despite the mud, it grows because of it. The mud is not the failure of the story. The mud is the part that makes the blossoming possible. And Michael blossomed. Not into perfection, because none of us do, but into authenticity, into wisdom, into tenderness, and into presence. And through it all, he remained an artist of seeing. Photography was not simply something Michael did, it was how he moved through the world. Even as a little girl, Melinda remembers never seeing her father without a camera. He was always searching for the perfect shot: gardens, nature, portraits, light, expression, small sacred moments that other people just passed right by. And there's something almost poetic, kind of ironic, let's call it holy, in the fact that a man who lost his right eye at the age of 4 became a gifted photographer. As if life itself was saying, you do not need perfect vision to truly see. Because Michael saw with his soul. He saw beauty, he saw character, he saw stories, he saw possibility. And he carried that same passion into music as well. You may or may not know that Michael was a radio engineer. He was a DJ, guitar player, harmonica player, teacher, a man known on the airwaves as J. Michael. He loved music deeply enough not just to listen to it, but to live inside of it. And somehow along the way, he found himself brushing shoulders with legends. Jerry Garcia, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimmy Vaughan, not merely as distant icons, but as fellow human beings sharing of moments of connection and even recovery. That detail says something really important to me. Michael's life was not polished and predictable. It was textured, it was layered, it was weathered. It was real. And thank God for that. He was real. And movement and detours and redemption. And maybe that's why so many people loved him. Because he knew what it meant to keep becoming, to keep going, to start again, to heal, to wander, to love. That's what we're honoring tonight. Not just the facts of Michael's life, but the spirit of it. A man who kept searching, a man who kept creating, a man who carried cameras and guitars and stories, a man who gathered a chosen family wherever he went. A man who finally allowed himself to bloom in the desert. And now as we gather in grief and gratitude, perhaps what we can each carry forward is just a little of what Michael embodied. To notice beauty, to stay curious, to keep evolving, to love the journey, and to become the lotus anyway. May we who remain honor him not only with our tears, but also with our living. Sure.
If you ever plan for the west, take my way, the highest best. If your kids all six or seven, your wives from Chicago to LA, 1 and 2, 5 miles away. If your kids 6 or 7, God goes to say the way, God keeps the way. So ready to see. Go. Like that, don't forget what all the things. Same empty God. Giving his life with that can't fall and change. It's your kiss. 666. Celebrate. Stop it. Sleep. Yeah. Thank you and welcome everybody here. This is a celebration of life of John Michael Cowdin. John Michael Cowdin was a great man, and I know very well that. I met him 2 years ago at the old center, and I could tell right away when I saw him that he was a musician. And then he looked like one of the old cowboys from Central Texas. And that made sense to me because I grew up in West Texas. So we had that familiarity about us. See the character in his face of rough life. I also saw in him that old way of sizing people up. Whereas one time I asked him, I said, when we met, I saw that look in your eyes. And he goes, yeah, what was that? I said, because that's where we came from in our background. One evening, waiting outside of Solid Grounds for a show to begin, Michael was sitting there, and I came over. We started talking, and I started telling him about my past, my alcoholism, my drug addiction. I was drinking alcoholically at 15. I was a heroin addict at 16, and we both just boom came together like two gears because his life was so very much the same way. Opened up the door of our hearts for Michael and I to totally express ourselves to each other. And a lot of men don't really do that, So along with the stories of addiction, music, alcoholism, and recovery, we knew some of the same musicians from his time in Austin, Dallas, Texas, Nashville. And so that was another thing and another connection with us. But we really bonded over our heroin addiction, drugs, and alcoholism. Same situations. Our experiences, his broken back, loss of his father at a very young age. He grew up not with an easy life. And when you grow up with stresses and pressures like that, you're always going to naturally look for ways to escape that moment. And that's where we ended up. Thank God we ended up both in recovery, or we wouldn't have been here this long. I asked Michael once, looking at him, and I go, do you think possibly we were outlaws in a past life? And he started laughing. I know. And he goes, I know damn well I was. You know, when you have a life that is that hard and that rough, it takes you down in life to a place. And in recovery, you're offered the work to do to help bring you up from that. And what I could see in Michael, that the work that he had done in the rooms of recovery and everything was truly amazing. And that was a whole other thing that we got to start bonding together on. There's a saying that no matter how far down the path in life you go, but there's another part of that they don't really talk about. And that is through all the spiritual work that we do to recover and become the characters that we originally and authentically are, as to our spiritual worth. And you don't get to hear that much said about that. I know he was always at meetings whenever he had a chance. And I know that he always helped others with his kindness and his spirit. And he truly was this old heart piece of steel.
Yeah.
But he was also so kind. And you could see that in his blue eyes. He always had a deep inner strength that I really admired and I recognized. And the more that he was in sobriety, the brighter in light that he got. He helped others from his wisdom and kindness. More and more, his character and spirituality molded and came out. His character was powerful, kind, and wise. When I was taking Michael to his radiation treatments, I remember him asking me to do that. And it just seemed like a natural, yeah, I'll be happy to do that. Hey, I'll be there to help you. And I ended up being able to take him to all of his radiation treatments. And that was another very deep bonding that Michael and I got to experience. I also was seeing the decline in this great man. In that, this other strength and fortitude came out in him. He was determined by God to walk his way up to the place where he was going to get his treatments and walk back. And I remember one day went to the facility and they said, "Oh no, you need to go next door." So we kind of, and he grabbed his walker and we started walking. And I said, "Can I just get you in the car and drive you over there a little bit?" He goes, "No, I'm good." And the drive and the fortitude that was in him was amazing. He was not going to give up, and he didn't. That was another great thing about the man. This decline. Found ways to make each other crack up and laugh. And at the time where the medication doses came to be hourly, on the hour, and it was morphine and if you're familiar with those will knock an elephant out in a second. Now, what I saw in him, so in those treatments, he would nod off sometimes, and I would watch him very closely because I was anticipating, I don't want him to fall out and, land on the floor. So I'd watch him really closely. But when he would come back, his eyes, I could see such clarity, the clarity of someone who did not mentally go back into that addiction because of all the morphine and the Dilaudid they were pumping into him. A lesser person would have. But looking in his eyes, I saw that clarity. As it was progressing, he was moving slower and slower. And I started talking to him more about, are you ready to go? Have you taken care of all your business here? And we talk about that. And I tell him, I know you've made all your amends the best way that you can. And you've done your work. You've cleaned your slate here. You're ready to go whenever you choose. Are you in that acceptance? And he got to that point of acceptance. He still had a little bit of that, I don't know. But I told him one day, I said, you know what? Here's going to be the thing. When you do make it over to the other side, one day we're going to feel you patting us on the head going, it's okay over here. I'm doing fine. They moved him to the last center that he was in for his medical treatments and everything. He was unconscious. And I would go there. And Dean and Denise were there, and they were singing with him. And then as he left, I started talking to Michael, and I would just ask him, tell him, I'd say, hey, I know you're ready. Just float to the other side. And I kept telling him that. Today, Dean and Denise had just left. Oh no, I don't think that was, no. On the last day I had gotten there and I had spent about an hour with Michael, and I'd be talking to him and I'd have my right hand on his shoulder. And in talking to him, I could feel him raise that shoulder up to meet my palm. And I knew he's here. And his chest, and I could feel once in a while his hand raise up into my palm. And I knew, even though you're unconscious, you're here, Michael. I said, you're in this transition, you are moving. And the next day I went there and I was just talking to him and praying with him and everything. Okay, and time to leave. And shortly after that, Carmela came in. God bless you, dear. And I know that Carmela prayed with Michael and helped Michael a lot, especially with his first wife's passing, with Barbara's passing. And she was a great help and inspiration to Michael. And the two souls of them matched so perfectly because they both kind of vibrated the same frequency. That's the light that was in Michael. And so I can't remember if it was as you were about to leave, he started to pass. And I know that Susan popped in shortly after that. And I know that Susan had told me that she got to sit there by his side and she got to see that last tear come from his left eye. He had a good life, even though it was a big struggle in his younger days. He made it the quality and caliber of life that he did. He built himself up from breaking himself so far down with drugs and alcohol that he came to be one of the most admirable men I have ever met in my life. And so, in closing with this, what I would love for each and every one of you to do, please turn and look at the person next to you. Because what you're seeing is the indelible spiritual mark that John Michael Cowdin left in every single one of us. And we will never forget that, and we will never let that go. God bless you, John Michael Cowdin. It's like the dream that I just never dreamed. But sad to stay right. It's the end. So, it's the end. Oh, I stayed here so long. It's not here. But it's all right. It's all right. So it's beginning. It's all scared. But you need to yeah. If there's only no, it's not there. No, it's there.
For sharing so personally and perfectly about our John Michael. That was wonderful. So now, precious community, the time has come to close out the ceremony part of tonight's celebration. And reflection. I'm going to offer up a quote from our founder of religious science, Ernest Holmes, along with just a little blessing. And then as the closing song is played, the family is inviting you to come forth. They'll come up first, and then you're welcome to come on up and grab a flower and place it here to have a moment with Michael. And then we're going to head to the back of the sanctuary where we'll be breaking bread together because we've had lots of wonderful times eating with Michael. I remember many a campfire in my old backyard with my kids and him and eating and telling stories. So we're gonna have a beautiful time of doing that in the back of the sanctuary. And that's really where you're invited to share your stories of Michael with each other. And there's some beautiful photos for you to enjoy of Michael back there as well. So let's begin our benediction now. From Ernest Holmes, death loses its sting and the grave its victory when we realize that the eternal being of that which is within ourselves is the divine. Stay too long in any one place, just long enough to gather the experience necessary to the unfolding and advancement of the soul. And when this change comes, we should certainly welcome it with a smile on the lips and a song in the heart. And while it is we weep for our friend, we should also know that his life goes on. So, dear Michael, may the road rise gently beneath you now. May the music continue. May the next life be full of beauty. And may the light you spent your life capturing surround you completely in this next great adventure that your gypsy soul is experiencing now. Bon voyage, Michael. Amen.
No grave can hold my body down. There ain't no grave can hold my body down. When I hear that trumpet sound, I'm gonna rise without and cry. Ain't no grave can hold my body down. Well, look way down the road. What do you think I see? I see a band of angels, and they're coming at me. Ain't no grave can hold my body down. There ain't no grave can hold my body down. Well, look down yonder, girl. Put your feet on the land and sing. But Gabriel, don't you blow no trumpet till you know there ain't no grave can hold my body down. Ain't no grave can hold my body down. Jesus meet me in the middle of the air. And if these wings don't fail me, I will meet you. The river and lonely there. Well, I check in, but ain't no can hold my body down. There ain't no can hold my body down. There ain't no can hold my body down. Someone when the smile so eyes smiles to us. Stars like this eyes